Welcome to the How to Play video for Ruin. Here's what you'll need. A deck containing anywhere from 40 to 50 cards, your Guardian card, something to keep track of health, also something to keep track of your resources. In Ruin, there are three types of cards to consider when playing. Your Guardian card, creatures, and supporters. The first card to consider when building a deck is a Guardian. Each Guardian has a type, which can have an effect on the game and also determines whether or not certain cards can be used in your deck. All Guardians have an ability which is active the moment they are brought into play. Some Guardians will have a constant ability, which is always active. Others will have an ability you can use during your turn or when the ability states you can use it. A Guardian is in play from the beginning of the game and remains there until the game is over. Guardians all have a set amount of health, that number usually being 100, but at times can differ. If a Guardian's health is less than 100, you can play multiple Guardians as long as their health is equal to 100. If you do choose to have multiple Guardians, you choose which Guardian you start the game with, and this is known as your leading Guardian. The rest are kept out of play in what is known as your other deck until your current Guardian in play is destroyed. An other deck is a zone not involved in the game and can hold up to 20 cards that are specifically meant to be kept out of play during the game, but these cards can be brought into play in specific ways. Let's say you have a Guardian with 25 health in play, and 30 damage is dealt to it. That Guardian is destroyed and sent to your deceased pile, and a follow-up Guardian from your other deck is brought into play, and the remaining 5 damage is dealt to it. Keep in mind, if you have multiple Guardians whose health is equal to 100, they must all be the same type, and you cannot have multiple copies of the same Guardian. After both players' Guardians have been brought into play, both players start off the game with 2 resources. Resources are used to play creatures from your hand or to activate certain card abilities. Next, each player draws 5 cards from their deck. Once, at the start of the game, each player can choose up to 5 cards in their hand to shuffle back into their deck, and then draw the same number of cards. During each player's turn, there are 7 stages. The beginning stage initiates the start of your turn. Next is your resource gain stage. Here, you will gain 2 resources. Keep in mind, a player can only have a maximum of 12 resources. If the player has 12 when entering this stage, they do not gain any resources. Next is your draw stage. During this stage, you draw 1 card from the top of your deck. You can only have 8 cards in your hand at the end of your turn. If you have more than 8 cards in your hand, you must discard cards until the number of cards in your hand is 8. Now we have the first stage. During this stage, you have the ability to conceal or play cards from your hand and use your card's abilities. There are 2 types of cards you can have in your deck. The first type of card we'll be going over is a creature. You can only have 3 copies of the same creature in your deck. There's 13 different types of creatures you can play in your deck. There's 10 things to consider when looking at a creature for your deck. Their name, Guardian restriction, radiation level, resource cost, sacrificial resource cost, type, strength, health, traits, and ability. This is not for in-game use. This is just the set in which the card was released. A creature's type is used to categorize itself. Not every card has a Guardian restriction, but if they do, a Guardian restriction restricts creatures to only be played in a deck with a Guardian of that type. Keep in mind, a Guardian restriction can be different from its own type. Next, we'll be going over resource cost. Say you want to play this card from your hand. It costs 1 resource, so you will have to pay 1 resource in order to play this card from your hand. There are several ways to play a creature. You can play a creature in your offense row or defense row. You can also conceal a creature in your defense row. A creature can be moved to a different row once per turn, but not the turn they are played. A card cannot be moved to an occupied zone. Also, the turn a creature is concealed, it cannot be played. A concealed creature must be played in the zone it is already occupied. Here, we'll be going over sacrificial resource cost. When a resource cost is red, you must use other creatures that you control as payment. Creatures used as payment are sent to the deceased pile, and this is not treated as being destroyed. You can use any number of creatures for sacrificial play as long as their resources are equal to or more than the creature being played. Now we'll be going over supporters. There are two things to look at when considering a supporter for your deck: its type and if it has a guardian restriction. Similar to creatures, you can only have 3 copies of the same supporter in your deck. Supporters can be played from your hand or concealed in your defense row. Supporters can't be played the turn they are concealed. After your first stage, you have your conflict stage. During this stage, creatures in your offense row can engage in conflict. If there are no creatures in your opponent's territory, you can engage your opponent's guardian. When a guardian is successfully engaged, it loses health equal to the creature's strength that engaged it. So, if Hungulus has 3 strength, then the opposing guardian will lose 3 health. Let's say your opponent controls a creature. If they do, you cannot engage their guardian in conflict. If your opponent has multiple creatures in play, you can target any of those creatures for conflict regardless of zone or row. Now we will be going over creature-to-creature conflict. The creature being engaged will always lose 1 health. But if your creature has an equal to or lower strength than the creature it's engaging, your creature also loses 1 health. Seeing as Hungulus only has 1 health, after damages have been applied, Hungulus is destroyed. If a creature loses health but is not destroyed, it is always turned counterclockwise. This is just to keep track of a creature's health. Say Hungulus engages Sisek. The creature with less strength will have the difference subtracted from the owner's guardian. Now the damage has been applied, Hungulus is destroyed and sent to the deceased pile, whereas Sisek will be turned counterclockwise. If Sisek were to engage Hungulus instead, seeing as Sisek has more strength than Hungulus, Hungulus loses health and Sisek does not. Say Hungulus is concealed in your defense row. Since there are no creatures in your territory, your opponent can engage your guardian. Before damage is applied, you can reveal a creature in your defense row in response to the engagement. You must have the resources to play a creature before revealing it. Once revealed, you then pay the resource cost required to play the creature. Now the engagement is redirected to the creature you revealed. Since Hungulus is in your defense row, your guardian doesn't take any damage from this conflict, but your creature still loses health. Lastly, creatures in your defense row cannot engage in conflict. The second stage has all of the same properties as the first stage. The end stage is the end of your turn. Next, we're going to talk about creature traits and supporter types. First, let's talk about creature traits. As of now, there are 6 different traits: neutral, resilience, threat, docile, utility, and resistance. Neutral creatures aren't given any special mechanics. Any creature in the zone behind a resilience creature cannot be targeted for conflict. Threat creatures are the only creatures that can engage creatures protected by resilience. In addition, if a threat creature engages a creature with a strength equal to or lower than its own, the defending creature is destroyed regardless of health. This is still considered conflict and not being destroyed by an ability. If a threat creature is being engaged, normal rules of conflict apply for creatures with an equal to or higher amount of strength. If a creature with lower strength engages a threat creature, the creature with threat will not lose health and the engaging creature will be destroyed. If a docile creature engages or is defending against a creature that isn't docile, the docile creature is destroyed. This is considered being destroyed by conflict. Normal rules of conflict will apply between 2 docile creatures. If a creature's radiation level reaches 100, they would normally be destroyed. Resistance creatures cannot be destroyed by radiation. After a utility creature has been brought into play, it can attach itself to a creature in play. It is now treated as a supporter, but does not occupy a zone on the terrain. Now we'll be looking at supporter types. There are 8 different types of supporters: neutral, utility, terrain, constant, counter, continual, tactical, and occurrence. Every supporter has either priority 1 or 2. What this basically means is a priority 2 supporter can respond to the action of a priority 1 or 2 supporter or ability, whereas a priority 1 card can never be played in response to something and can only be used during the first or second stage, or when the effect states you can use it, or when it activates. All supporters can only be played or concealed from your hand into your defense row. If a supporter is concealed, similar to a creature, it must be down for a full turn before being played. After a supporter has been played, it is sent to the deceased pile. A neutral can only be played during your first or second stage. A utility can only be played during your first or second stage. It is played from your hand into the defense row and is then attached to a creature on the terrain. A terrain can only be played during your first or second stage, but is not played in a defense row. It's played in its own designated zone called the terrain zone. It cannot be concealed. A terrain remains in play until destroyed or stated otherwise. A constant can be played during your first or second stage, and similar to terrain cards, they remain in play until destroyed or stated otherwise. Constants have what is known as durability. Creatures can engage a card with durability. For every successful engagement, a card's durability is reduced by 1, regardless of a creature's strength or trait. If a card's durability reaches 0, it's destroyed. Cards with durability are not treated as creatures during conflict, so they cannot prevent a player from entering conflict with a guardian. A counter must be concealed for a full turn before being played. A counter can be played in response to any action, card ability, or the beginning or end of any stage. A continual must be concealed for a full turn before being played. Continual can be played anytime, but when it is played, its properties become that of a constant. The only time a tactical cannot be played is from your hand on your opponent's turn. An occurrence can be played from your hand in response to an action during your opponent's turn only. Now we'll be going over afflictions. There are 2 types of afflictions, being stunned or being silenced. Supporters are unaffected by afflictions. Afflictions are permanent while in play, but can be removed by an ability. If a creature is silenced, it no longer has the use of its ability while in play. If a creature is stunned, it cannot engage in conflict or move between rows. Now we'll be going over general terms of the game. Zones are individual spaces on the terrain. Anytime a card includes the word adjacent, it applies to a card on either the zone to the left or right of the card. If a card is ever concealed by a card ability, its health or durability stays the same. A clone is an exact copy of a creature it targets, and when it leaves the terrain or is concealed, it is destroyed, but not sent to the deceased pile. Instead, it leaves the game entirely. Opposed to a clone, a proxy creature is not a copy of a creature in play, but has its own attributes. A proxy creature is destroyed in the same manner as a clone. There are 3 terms to conflict: engaging, which means a creature you control is initiating the conflict; being engaged means a creature is on the defending side of the conflict; and entering conflict pertains to both sides of conflict. Before or after damage applies to before or after conflict is successful.
Thank you for watching our How to Play video. All the artwork in these templates are borrowed and do not belong to us. If your artwork was used, or you would like your artwork to be a part of this project, please contact us at facebook.com/ruintcg or follow us on Instagram at ruintcg.
Is that a video?
No, this is just a picture.
Oh, dude, you're gonna have to cut this shit.